And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. If you are listening to us on your podcast device, please hop on over and why don't you make a contribution to the mailbag? The 5-star mailbag, of course. You leave a 5-star rating and a review. Can be nice, can be criticism. It seems that right now the enemy of the army of Cover 3 listeners is an internet connection. So maybe you want to vent your frustration there, but include your question and it will be used in a future mailbag episode. It will be added to the big old bag of mail. Now, also full episodes in video for multi-platform excellence, youtube.com/cover3 and in the CBS Sports app on your Apple TV, Roku device, whatever you're using for OTT. In the CBS Sports app, you can find full video episodes of the Cover 3 podcasts like this and the many others, which for this week, we got Pac-12 win totals coming. We got some massive games coming up this weekend. So another exciting week, as always, on the Cover 3 podcast. Before we get out of here, we have, we're going to check in on the heats on some seats for some big time coaches across college football at big time programs. So a look at the rankings, the AP poll reaction and the CBS Sports rankings, some takeaways and some talking points off that. And as well as we've got some notable opt-outs from across the country, all that and much more. But I wanted to begin with some headlines that we've got coming out of Georgia ahead for our beloved Dogs, because we've got, the SEC on CBS game of the week. It's Florida, Georgia. It's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. We hope it is not the world's largest outdoor COVID party, but the how it's handled, that's yet to be seen by all the fans and anybody who is in and around the Jacksonville area. The Georgia Bulldogs right now are starting to get things are starting to get a little thin on defense. Jordan Davis could miss this game. Richard LeCounte could be out for a few weeks. We're starting to all of a sudden see what was described by others as just like one of the deepest and most talented defenses in the country starting to get a little bit thin. And when we're talking about matching up against Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask, the Super Swamp Brothers, and this Florida offense, could be a little bit concerning. Where's the level of alarm? I guess, like, Barton, where's the level of alarm right now? Do you think that the Bulldogs still have enough to be able to cycle in guys and be able to have a defense that can win in Jacksonville on Saturday?
Yeah, I think they do. I think that Florida is going to have to find some offense regardless. Like, I understand that the defense is taking a few hits, and I understand that the defense won't be at full strength. But I think the defense is still good enough. I think the defense against this Florida team wasn't going to be enough anyway. I think that the offense had to sort of get things rolling. So I just think this is still a good, maybe it's if Florida's defense typically plays at a 10, maybe this one plays at a 9. I think it sort of is negligible. My expectation, look, I'm not saying like Jordan Davis is a big miss like that. That's a big deal. Richard LeCounte, that's a big deal. I think they've got enough good players otherwise to be okay. I'm just not, it doesn't change my perspective of the game. I don't know who I'm picking, but if I was going to pick Florida before, I'm still going to pick Florida now. If I was going to pick Georgia before, I'm still going to pick Georgia now, because that means that I was comfortable with Georgia's quarterback, comfortable with Georgia's offense. I haven't come to that conclusion, but that's I think the sort of the decision you're making when you're assessing this matchup.
Yeah, I'm pretty much 100% with you, because my concern with this matchup for Georgia, and like losing those guys on defense does not help their chances to win, but the defense is not what I've been worried about at all with Georgia. I'm worried about, the offense that ranks, 12th in the SEC in passer efficiency. Like, if you look at the bottom of the league, first of all, there's Mississippi State in dead last, which is ironic and funny. Right ahead of them is Kentucky, and just like this much ahead of Kentucky's passer rating is Georgia. Now, so for me, it's like if Georgia's going to beat Florida, they need to get much better offensively than they have been to this point. That said, playing Florida's defense, you would think would help it. But again, as we talked about on the reaction pod on Saturday, Florida's defense played pretty well against Mizzou on Saturday. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or if that's just like a one game kind of outlier. But my problem with Georgia all year and our problem with Georgia last year and that we thought had been solved over the offseason was, can this team score enough points to win these kind of games? And at this point so far this year, it has not shown me any sign that it could score enough points to win these kind of games. So I don't know what I'm picking yet either, but I have a good idea of what side I'm going to end up picking here.
I think if you're Georgia, the only way you beat Florida is to keep this a low-scoring affair. And that requires your defense to be at full strength. So I do think these injuries should be a massive concern if you're a Georgia fan. And I kind of like so today I watched a bunch of Stetson Bennett film.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Jeez.
So we're doing a preview for the TV side this weekend, like previewing the game. So they're like, hey, can you give me some Trask, breakdowns and some Stetson Bennett breakdowns? And like, I was writing stuff down, taking notes and jotting down plays. So my mindset when I went in was like lack of arm strength and forces too many balls, like too much of a gunslinger. So I found like instantly, like within 5 minutes, I found like 3 plays. Like it was happening too fast. And then I was like, oh, wait, he's also getting balls batted down. So like he not only is small, but he plays small. So like more issues were cropping up. So I felt like I actually at the end of my tape session, like I put down all these plays and I was like, I feel kind of bad. Like I'm burying this kid. Like he has made some nice plays, but it is an issue. It is a real issue for Georgia's offense. If I'm Florida, and I know this kind of delves away from the defensive concerns, but if I'm Florida, you know what helps your defense? If you focus on one thing and you stop that, I would absolutely sell out to stop that run game and man up on the outside and say, go ahead, Stetson Bennett, beat us. Like, and then it's not going to be easy to slow down Georgia's rushing attack, but it makes it a whole lot easier when you're not really worried about getting beat on the outside. And maybe that risk reward can burn you. You might give up a big play, but I also think with Georgia's defense getting battered, you're going to probably put up some points, and that favors Florida. Of course, you got to remember who you're talking to. This is Gator Dan talking here. So, like, in case it's been clear, like, what side I'm on, you guys know I've been bullish on the Gators, and I've felt even more so, like, as the last couple of weeks have unfolded, really since the Bama game with Georgia.
See, I think this is a really big deal. I think that Richard LeCounte, top 3 safety in the country. Maybe. I mean, he's an all-American candidate at the safety position. And we're talking about the best tight end in the country. Like, Richard LeCounte wasn't going to one-on-one match up against Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts gets moved all around in the offense, plays a lot of different positions in the way that they sort of scheme it up. But, man, like, I really think that you wanted to have him there. And it stinks because he was he was driving his motorcycle, right? And he got hit by another.
I think, wasn't it?
Got hit by a car. Like that stinks. Like I really hope that he's able to make his way back, but that's just that's a big time loss. Jordan Davis is like, is Jordan Davis one of the 3 stars that ended up being hit?
He was 3. Yep.
Yeah. Like Jordan might be a first round draft pick, just the way that he's developed and the way that he's like, I think this is big time setbacks, and I cannot wait for the heroic performance by Georgia when they win on Saturday, and just the way that they're going to rally behind all these losses and be able to get over on the Gators, who are going to come in with way too much confidence per usual.
Did we decide that we weren't was it the reaction pod over the weekend where we decided we're not a Georgia pod anymore?
I decided we're not a Georgia pod.
Tom's off the train.
I'm not.
You're I was about to jump off after Arkansas. You're hanging on. Danny was never really on it. This is Gator Dan we're talking to over here. I was willing to give Georgia a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt if they could, but that Kentucky game, that might have kicked me off too, because here we are. And I think to be a Georgia pod, you have to have confidence that they can go into
blind confidence that your offense that hasn't looked dynamic and your defense that's banged up is going to go into this game when Florida smells blood in the water and can absolutely pull this thing away. Yeah, I understand where I'm at. I've gone in the Podstradamus chamber and I've tried to envision this game and play it out. And the versions that end up with the Georgia win require a lot of unlikely scenarios.
You've just taken it very personal, the way the Florida fans have not appreciated your Georgia poddom. I am just in a very honest place now. Like, as this game approaches, without digging into the matchups and the personnel, and just on very surface reaction level blink type of commentary, Florida certainly feels like the better team.
Mm-hmm.
And that ain't Disney Dog. That's not what Disney Dog says. And so I'm starting to worry about my Georgia fandom.
Yeah, because again, to reiterate what I was saying on Saturday night, why were Georgia fans mad at us all last year? Why did Georgia fans feel like we were mean to Georgia? We were down on Georgia. We were an anti-Georgia pod. Because our problem with them was, no matter how good they were or how many games they were winning, we said with that offense and the way they play, there's no way in the world that they're going to be able to do anything. And that's what made Georgia fans mad with us. So then we said, if they make these changes on offense specifically, we'll get behind them. And then in the offseason, that's looked like what they were doing. They brought in Todd Monken with the idea they were going to revolutionize the offense. They brought in Jamie Newman. Then they brought in JT Daniels. It's like, man, they're going 100% all in on this. And then Jamie Newman opts out. We have yet to see JT Daniels. And Kirby or whatever is happening is like, nope, we're just going to hand the ball off 40 times a game and throw little 5-yard slants, and we are not going to push the ball vertically. They're playing exactly like they did last year, the team we were anti. So if I'm being honest with myself, I can't sit here and be a Georgia pod guy anymore. It's done. Until that shows up, I'm out.
That's it. I'm out. I'm out too. I'm just out. You're right. That was the reason we were a Georgia pod.
Mm-hmm.
We were a Georgia pod because we believed in some of the evolutions that were taking place, and here we are, and it's the same team. So,
and it's like a junior Jake Fromm playing QB now. It's not even Jake Fromm. It's like a lesser Jake Fromm.
Blind faith. Have at it, Chip.
Yeah.
If you're a Georgia fan, I can understand being frustrated and saying, so what? We've owned this rivalry the last 5 or 6 years. They can't be like, we haven't had anything better. Like, this is what we are. We beat them anyway. I think this is a fascinating stat. Do you guys realize how many 300-yard passing games they've had in the last 3 years?
Georgia?
Just that's all you have to do. 300 yards passing. That's it. Just go over the 300-yard mark.
I would guess
4.
Like I'd say lower than that.
Chip nailed it. Last year they had 1 with Jake Fromm versus Arkansas State. 2018 they had 2, 1 versus Vanderbilt. The other was 301 performance versus Bama. And in 2017 there was 1 versus Missouri. It's just not who they are. And like, I think we all bought into, this is going to be this year's LSU. New NFL style coordinator, transfer quarterback, and it hasn't panned out that way. But I think if you're Georgia, you're still hanging on to, we don't even need all that. And maybe you don't versus Florida, but you better believe you're going to need it versus Bama, which we already saw.
To be clear, I'm off the Georgia pod. I'm not saying Georgia can't beat Florida this weekend. Georgia can 100% beat Florida, but until Georgia changes, I'm not changing my overall opinion of the program ceiling, which is what brought us in. So yeah, no, you're 100% right, Dan.
Yeah, Georgia's got to meet us in the middle. We stepped out, tried to meet Georgia in the middle, and they didn't take a step forward for us.
I'm in an abusive relationship with Georgia right now.
You are.
Georgia's not giving anything back.
It's
and
toxic,
I'm
Chip.
Stay loyal. I'm just saying, one of these teams has a championship mindset and the other doesn't. Player discipline, COVID
discipline, coach discipline, getting on the field, getting a little crazy. Just crazy. I was just looking this up because I was looking up stats. Alabama has had 4 400-yard passing games this year.
Yes.
Like, that's insane. That's insane to me. Like, how the difference in dynamic and the evolution of Bama. Bama was built the dynasty with what Kirby Smart is trying to do now. But then Nick Saban extended the dynasty by evolving. Like that's what Georgia has to do.
So I've got a theory. I got a theory that you remember like there was this movement of offensive coaches, and there was this movement of like Big 12 sort of, well, they're scoring
like
all these
Dana?
points.
Yeah.
Like, and they're scoring all these points, and but they're scoring points, but they're leaving their defense vulnerable, and so they're not. It's really like a selfish approach. It's this offensive mindset where defense, you're on your own, you figure it out, and I, as the offensive guru, am all about getting yards and getting points, and whether I win or not, like that doesn't really matter, and that's all just sort of, again, this is a sort of perception, right? And so then I think obviously it's become more mainstream now to be a little more offensive minded, offensive focused, to sort of expose your defense a little bit more at the expense of points. And so I think now it's shifted a little bit because there's still Kirby Smart still out there, and Will Muschamp's of the world, and Jeremy Pruitt's, and some of these old head defensive guys. And those guys, in some cases, are unwilling to compromise and move towards the offensive approach because they're now I think they're kind of sacrificing the likelihood of a win for the sake of playing their style of football. Like they don't want to give to the offense because they only know, like in their head, they're programmed to win a certain way, which is trenches, like defense, and like we're not going to get in these basketball and grass, shootouts. Well, the people that are winning national championships are getting in some of those shootouts. And so I think that there is a realization that needs to take place somewhere here for some of these coaches, Kirby Smart included, in terms of like what it means to win games today in college football.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm all for taking a contrarian approach at times, particularly with like style of football. But like I've always said that there should always be like the bad teams in every Power 5 conference, the teams that are never going to be anything more than mediocre, like, your Vanderbilts, programs like that. I've always said that they should be running the option like Georgia Tech had been, because it kind of neutralizes things or gives you a better chance to compete on a weekly basis. But the teams that are supposed to be doing that, going the opposite way, are not the teams that have the talent that Georgia has. Like, the contrarian option is to take advantage of a talent gap. When you're Georgia and you have that talent, you need to be playing the same modern kind of game, because the way that they're playing is just not where football is now. It's not the sport anymore. It kind of sucks for those coaches who have a specific kind of way of doing it, in a way of the belief that they were raised in coaching. But you have to evolve, man.
Sorry, Chip.
It's okay.
It's a tough segment for you.
Championship mindset. See what happens.
I could see Chip after the show just washing off his red and black face paint, sadly looking in the mirror, like
those shoulder pads with spikes on them. Got to hang them up.
But again, I haven't made a decision on who I'm picking to win the game this weekend.
The thing is, I dug into it, and everything sensible comes up Florida, really? And I'm going to choose Georgia. Yeah. I'm just,
does it be funny?
Well, everyone is going to be out here. I mean, Florida's at 4.5 right now. We're going to do early line look aheads later. It is going to be a trendy dog. It's going to be a trendy underdog pick.
Florida's a 4.5 dog right now?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we'll see. All right.
Everybody opens their account real quick.
Early line look aheads will come later. An update from Pitt coach Pat Narduzzi on Monday. The Panthers defense takes a massive hit as Paris Ford has opted out for the remainder of the season. He currently leads the Panthers in both tackles and interceptions. He led the team in tackles and interceptions last year. He's one of the best. We mentioned one of the top 3 or 4 safeties in the country. I think that Paris Ford also has that sort of designation. He is going to be an NFL draft pick. And so, opting out to prepare for the NFL draft is also, opting out on the team and on the season. I don't know, man. I've got 2 instant reactions. I know Barton, you want to get into this, but like I'm almost a little bit too much of an apologist, because playing for Pat Narduzzi in the midst of a 4-game losing streak might be the line that you'd be like, I don't know, man, this ain't it. And again, like, I don't know. I'm just knowing Pat Narduzzi, knowing that Pitt program, knowing after starting 3-0, then losing 4 straight, and a bunch of them were like 1-point losses. I can't imagine the vibes are good inside that locker room. But Barton, what'd you make of the news?
Well, I just found like so he announced. I'm sorry. Did you guys see some sort of a release or a Twitter like announcement or anything like that? Did he give specific reasons for his opt out?
No. Narduzzi confirmed to ESPN, the Pittsburgh Sports News and Pittsburgh Post-Gazette both reported it, and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette report included COVID-19 concerns contributed to Ford's decision, but not that it was the reason.
Right. Okay. So obviously we're in this COVID year, this weird COVID year, and we have had a lot of people opt out for COVID reasons. I am not equipped, nor do I want to judge anyone for their reasons for opting out of a season, particularly in a year like this. So I don't even want to make this really about Paris Ford. But the reality is, like, he's played 7 games at this point. And COVID, like, he was cool with COVID for 7 games. Then there's a 4-game losing streak and he's opting out. And again, like, I really am not trying to make this specific to Paris Ford, other than this season has offered almost like a cover for some guys if they do want to opt out, if they do want to just say, you know what, like this isn't fun anymore. And if this was a typical year and Paris Ford, a potential All-American safety, 7 games in, and his team was 3-4, and this is just a normal season, if he was just like, nah, I'm out, then that would be like groundbreaking, like unheard of. And there's this sort of normalization of it this year. And I think that I think that this could become something, because it's become such a sort of standard up. He opts out, like just a sort of a passing headline, player opts out. I think it could start to be something you see in the future beyond the COVID world. And I think that this, because ultimately,
well, you do. You opt out of bowl games. Players opt out of bowl games every single season.
So it's already started.
It's definitely already started. Or what if you get a hernia surgery or whatever injury? Hey, I pulled my, like, there's always excuses that can provide cover if you want to opt out, quit on your team. There always is. Like, you know, that's just the way it is. This is the new normal. This absolutely opens up the opportunity, because as Chip pointed out, we've already seen guys do that. And because of the pay the players debate, you can't really get up here and crush them, which I get, but they're quitting on their teammates. I was raised a certain way. Maybe this is where I sound like the old guy, but I was raised, and I teach my daughters this way. So it's not like it's something that I'm just giving up on. But I teach my daughter's playing basketball right now. She's in 7th grade. She plays junior high basketball. And she's, halfway through her season, she's like, I'm not playing very much. I'm not having very much fun. And I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, I'll finish, because I have to. Like, she knows she's not quitting on the team. Like, that's ever since she was 4, starting soccer. That's the way I was raised. You don't quit on your teammates. I do think this is quitting, but we do call it opting out, and we do provide the cover of, well, you want to go to the NFL, like, we can't pay them, so it's hard to criticize. Like, this is a business decision, and the money is so big, so it does become a business decision a lot. So it's a very complex, nuanced issue that I think coaches have to manage. Because can you imagine if a coach criticizes a player that opts out? Like, there goes his recruiting classes. Like, forget it. Like, you can't recruit to a place if you don't say it's okay for a player to opt out. It's a complex issue.
That's the thing. I don't even think it's that complex. I think you're right. It's both quitting on your team, and it's also a smart business decision for some players. That's the whole thing. And it's finding that balance in between it. I don't know, but I agree. I don't think this is a new thing. I think this is just the next step in what is something that had already started, and what is likely going to be something that we continue to see. Because, I mean,
wasn't it tiny injuries with Fournette down the stretch of the season?
Fournette had like a sprained ankle for like 3.5 months. And
that's what I think also will provide some, if anybody ever has criticized, they'll just use, and I'm not using Fournette saying he was faking it, but other guys will say, oh, I got this ankle issue, or I got a shoulder, I got to get this, I'm just going to take off and, get healthy.
Yeah, I don't like it. But I don't. I don't like it either. I don't. I agree with you. I feel like it's quitting on your team, and I don't like it. But I don't really hold it against them too much at the same time. And maybe that's really part of the problem, because we know NFL teams aren't going to hold it against them. NFL teams aren't going to give the slightest crap about whether or not you quit halfway during the year. All they want to know about is what you're going to be able to do for them. And can you do it at a small cap number while they're doing it before they move on to the next guy? So
if you're a top 15 guy, I think once you start becoming a guy who's second, third rounder, then it starts becoming, oh, this guy didn't want to play. Then I think it does become more of a question mark for coaches and scouts at the NFL level. I think, Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, done. And I do think that you've seen some of Leonard Fournette's. I remember this is injury, or if it's desire, like he hasn't exactly been a smashing success at the NFL. But then Christian McCaffrey has. So there's always going to be overreaction. There's going to be overanalysis. It's just the reality of the situation right now. But I will say this, because people are like, hey, we should pay him. They're never going to make enough money where it's the business decision is to stay the whole year, whether they're getting paid or not. Like whether the name, image, and likeness, they might make a few extra bucks. And we talked about that last week. But even if they were flat out paid, it'll always be a better business decision to opt out for the much, much bigger money in the NFL.
So the Kylin Hill decision also falls into the quitting on your team.
For sure.
Yeah, but at the same time.
Because I think some of this comes back on the coaches. Yeah. Like if you don't want your players to opt out, that falls on coaching to me, and your ability to keep the players engaged and keep them dialed in. And, if you are losing listen, like in this particular instance, Paris Ford, they called him the energy guy on the sidelines. Like he was like a real leader, like somebody who they counted on not only being the team leader in tackles and interceptions, but in a lot of that just sort of intangibles. That was one of the conversations even Pat Narduzzi himself was talking about. With no fans in the stands, he says we count on guys like Paris to be able to keep the team juiced and energized. And I don't know, when somebody who plays that role has decided to take some time away from the team, I think it reflects a little bit on the coaching or the coaching staff. The fact that you have clearly lost one of the most important voices in that locker room, as they've decided, like, you know what, this isn't worth it. Like you have to be the modern coach has to understand relationships with his players. You can't just be a break them down to build them up. You've got to be able to have those conversations. And so you got to handle them with kid gloves. Like you got to baby them. Like you have to. You cannot coach hard anymore. Let's look at Pat Narduzzi. You think he's getting more likable or less likable as they lose 4 in a row? And that's going to be, and that's not only Pat Narduzzi, that's any coach. And that's when you start, Mike Leach, he's quirky, he's fun. They've lost a few games. He's going to tell it like it is. He's not going to change. So he's got to get players that understand that. That's part of that purge that he's talking about. But a lot of I think, and there is no sympathy for coaches. They make millions of dollars. I think it's harder than ever to coach today. And it's not because X and O's. It's because you have to massage the relationship and you have to, manage those much differently than you did even just 10 years ago.
But I disagree. You can't coach them hard. I think you can coach them hard, but there has to be a deeper relationship beyond just
screaming,
cussing them out in practice, and then getting in the film room. Like there's just
coaches hard.
there's more there's just more to coaching right now. And Pat Narduzzi doesn't strike me as someone that's not necessarily gonna lean into the nuance of coaching someone hard and then making sure that he knows what kind of problems they're dealing with on the off the field. And that maybe that's not fair. I'm not trying to call out Pat Narduzzi here in this. I just think, yes, it's a much more nuanced coaching approach in a modern day football than you've had to have in the past, which is, I think, why you're seeing success from a guy like Jeff Hafley, who comes from this more young, relationship-based belief within the program kind of approach. And I think that those are the type of guys that are going to be the prototype for the successful coaches in this new generation.
I do want to say one thing we should consider too, and it's something we kind of mentioned, before the season really got going. Like, I don't think that this is the start of a trend. I think that we might see a spike. Maybe that's a bad choice of words, but we might see a spike in the amount of numbers doing it this year because of the situation. Because let's remember, like we talked about before the season began, at some point, the conditions that these kids have to play in this year in particular, with all the extra guidelines that are put on them, with all the constant testing, with everything that they can't do. And then if one of their teammates screws up or makes a mistake or just gets it while doing everything right, and they talk to them, and like Barton, you've told us, they got to go sit in a hotel for 10 days by them damn selves. At some point, this is probably wearing on them mentally. And if you're Paris Ford or anybody, maybe after 7 games, it's like, I don't want to do this. It's not worth it to me, especially if you're on a team that's lost 4 in a row.
Like, I'm going to go to a
But your
bubble
teammates
in
still have to.
Bradenton and just work out.
I still think it's quitting on your team, but I think that's going to play a role in this year as well, where it's just the mental grind of having to deal with all the shit you have to deal with this year that you didn't have to deal with last year. It's just, for some guys, it's going to be like, man, I'm done. I'm out.
Fair. That's a fair point. That could be an argument for this not being, just absolutely normal, commonplace in future years, because that's fair. I mean, this is more taxing than typical.
If you want to get in on the opportunity to get some guaranteed money, that's right. We're giving away $1,000 guaranteed every week in the new CBSSports.com college pick'em. All you got to do is go to cbssports.com/college. The contest opens every Tuesday and it runs until noon on Saturday. It's about 10 to 15 of the best college football games. You make your picks against the spread, different slate each week based on the games. And then your entry is now in there and you've got a shot to give away. You've got a shot to get some of the $1,000 guaranteed that we're giving away every single week. Once again, it's cbssports.com/college. I don't know if Pitt, Florida State will be included as one of the 10 to 15 best games of the slate. There are much bigger games out there, but the Florida, Georgia, SEC on CBS game of the week, Clemson, Notre Dame. I mean, we've got just some massive ones, and you can get entries in, starting on Tuesday, runs up until noon on Saturday. Pick all the games listed against the spread. You've got a shot to get some of the $1,000 that are being given away, guaranteed every single week. Once again, that is cbssports.com/college. Coming up on the other side, taking a look at the college football rankings. We've got some questions. And how does it feel in the pants of Tom Herman and Jim Harbaugh? Next.
That was odd phrasing.
How does it feel in them pants?
The khakis, I would imagine, are roomy, and I was trying to imagine what Tom Herman's pants would be, and I was just guessing maybe some team issued like dry fit khakis, and like not the big box store brand khakis, but his pants are a little bit more like, sleek, right?
What does
or something?
What does Harbaugh wear? What is his khaki brand of choice?
Dickies, isn't it? Well, I thought it was like some real basic like Walmart brand, wasn't it?
I thought it was Lululemon. No,
so he switched.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seriously? Oh! I was gonna say Kirkland, some Kirkland brand pants.
That's what it's. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, where you can just go to Costco and get a 30-pack. Turning our attention to the new set of college football rankings. A little headline. Woo! CBS Sports 127. It's got a new number 1. We saw in the coaches poll and the AP poll, Alabama started picking up some more first place votes. And the change has happened at the CBS Sports 127, the premier ranking system in college football. Alabama takes over as the new number 1 team in the country. Not do they deserve it, but who do y'all have as your number 1 team in the country?
Bama.
And I've had Bama at mine for a while, since the Georgia win.
Me too. That's when I switched them too. It was, I think it was, and I flipped them back and forth. But now I've had them in there for 3 weeks, I think, for Bama at number 1. I mean, I just think Clemson does have some weaknesses that were on display, not only this week, but, it's their schedule's not as impressive. If you take in everything, if you take resume, if you take better receiving options, even without Jalen Waddle, I just think Bama's is better. And, the AP votes are starting to close the gap as well. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, let's see if Clemson goes out and blows out Notre Dame, that would add to their resume, and maybe I flip-flop again. But right now, as it sits now, I think Bama deserves that number 1 spot.
Mm-hmm. What does Ohio State have to do? Do they just need more games? Or y'all just sort of waiting on getting more data for the analysis?
Based on what I have seen from the Big Ten so far, I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to climb past Clemson or Alabama in my rankings unless one of them loses, because I just don't see an opponent on Ohio State's schedule this year that makes you say, okay, that's a better win than anything Alabama has or Clemson has. I think they're solidly number 3.
What if Penn State could just start boat racing people, and then that retroactively gives them a pretty good win, right?
It could, but they beat Penn State when Penn State wasn't the team boat racing people.
Yeah, but what does that matter? Does that matter?
It should look better. You're right.
It looks better, but I still evaluate it based on how the team was playing at the time. Because if Penn State's playing great in the end of November, that has no bearing on the team that Ohio State beat at the end of October.
Well, my point is Penn State could be playing pretty well right now. What if Indiana's really good? What if Indiana turns out to be a really good team, and this Penn State team held it to 111 yards prior to the final drive of the game? Like they played within 13 points of Ohio State. And my point is Penn State has played 2 good teams. It lost both times, but I think everyone would agree that Penn State was a better team than Indiana and would win the majority of a 10-game series, maybe significantly so. And no one expected them to beat Ohio State. So I guess my point is Penn State then with those two, neither of those looked bad, and they could just roll out the rest of the year and start blowing people out. You don't then retroactively think that week 2 win over Penn State is better than it appears currently?
It plays a role in my thought process, but let's say Penn State, balls out, wins out from this point on. Is a win over a 6-2 Penn State team really that much better than a win over a 6-2 Georgia team, or what could be a 7-1 Notre Dame team in your mind? Clear
Not
enough.
Better, but isn't it
helps in the conversation?
Isn't it?
Well, who's the second
similar
game then? Because Alabama still has to play Texas A&M. Alabama's going to be playing Auburn. Clemson's playing Notre Dame at least once. It might play it twice. It's also got a top 10 win over Miami. What is Ohio State's number 2 win after Penn State? Is it going to be a Michigan team that just lost to Michigan State?
I don't know. It depends on what Michigan looks like.
Right. If Michigan fixes issues.
That's the thing here is I'm not convinced that we were having a talk in the 24/7 Slack room today, and we were talking about Texas A&M, and I think Texas A&M is probably the second best team in the West, but I'm not convinced Texas A&M is very good. I'm not. I mean,
defensively, it has issues for sure.
The SEC, I just don't like. Auburn is not. You can't. I don't think you can pound your chest about an Auburn win. I don't think you certainly can't pound your chest about an LSU win right now.
But can you pound your chest over an Indiana win or a Michigan State win or a Maryland win?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But my point is, I don't think that like the SEC isn't rolling out this murderer's row of opponents. I think that the Big Ten, it looks a little bit like wacky right now, but I mean, everyone does across the country. Who do you really have confidence in as like a second tier team that you really trust and believe in?
None.
Right. So what's the difference? Is an SEC second tier? Or
I think Alabama already has a better win than any Ohio State can get. And I think if Clemson beats Notre Dame this week, it's going to have and does it without its starting QB, by the way. I think Clemson has a more impressive win than any Ohio State's going to be able to get. If you're going to do Ohio State, it's going to have to be on style points, because
I agree with
look at the rest of this. It's Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan. Those teams might be 4-4 at best.
So I've got Ohio State as my number 1, and it is not at all with resume into consideration. It's just that they've done everything right. Like they have like done it, lined up, taken control of games, won games handily. And if they just continue to do that and take care of business, then that's one of those where you just think on a down to down, on a points per drive, yards per play, like you almost start taking them and you put them in the vacuum, because you're right. There's not going to be anybody in the Big Ten that's going to be able to bolster a resume, but I could still look at him and be like, I don't know, man, with Justin Fields and those wide receivers and that defense getting after it. I think that Ohio State's the best team in the country.
All right, well, let me ask you this. If you've got Ohio State at number one because it's done everything right, what's Alabama done wrong?
It's very little. I mean, I don't
miss like that's
and
given up
it over.
That's the only game that really they've had in like that was surprising. I would say that that their defense looked vulnerable, but that was against an offense which is shredding almost everybody in the SEC. So like that would be the one nitpicking thing you could say.
I mean, I'm more impressed with what Alabama's done over a much larger sample size to this point than what Ohio State's done in 2
And that's what
I don't argue that. And I think that's fine. That's fair. And like if Ohio State never gets above 3 the rest of the way, I think that's fine too.
It's all going to be settled in the playoff,
right? But I do think that Ohio State, to me, I think Ohio State has the ability to earn its way up to number one based on just what it looks like on the field. I think I'm comfortable with elevating Ohio State based on what it looks like, because just like the committee, I got some pretty ass eyes.
But I think their best chance of jumping Clemson and Bama is wreaking havoc, like just wrecking every opponent, as opposed to hoping that Michigan finishes strong and Penn State finishes strong. And like I think that's their better case, is just annihilating their schedule and just being a wow factor, as opposed to, oh, that Penn State win looks better now at the end of the season than it did at the time.
Speaking of Michigan, how are they still ranked after losing Michigan State?
I don't know. I mean, I understand why it's ranked. It's just I don't understand why it's ranked when some other teams aren't. Like, why is Michigan ranked but Northwestern isn't? You know what I mean? Because Northwestern's 2-0. It absolutely demolished the Maryland team that beat the Minnesota team that Michigan beat. Meanwhile, Michigan just lost at home to a Michigan State team that lost to Rutgers the week before. So if you want to keep Michigan in your top 25 based on your feelings of it before the season, and you're not ready to say, well, one game's, I'm knocking it off the ballot completely, fine. I get it. But Northwestern needs to be on your ballot.
Yeah, I think that there should be wild, if you're doing rankings right at this stage,
pretty ass eyes. There
should be wild swings in the early going. And right now is the early going in the Big Ten. And so I don't think that we should pretend to know what Michigan is, and we should stick to their preseason rankings, because right now if anything, there's no way that resume, 2-game resume, is a top 25 resume. And now maybe again, like, it could all change. Michigan State maybe is really good. Maybe Michigan State's the top 15 team that just got unlucky with seven turnovers against Rutgers. But I don't think that's the case, and there's no reason we should.
You wrote about Jim Harbaugh and Michigan in the morning after, Tom. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, and so the back and forth, and we've got a lot of mailbag questions that have come in about Jim Harbaugh. A lot of Michigan fans listen to the show, and we have discussed the difference between, the way that he's viewed internally, the way it's discussed externally. Jim Harbaugh walks out of that Michigan State loss, and I think that the messages and the commentary from a lot of people that are not as plugged into the program look at these losses to obviously Ohio State, but then also these losses to Michigan State that have cropped up along the way. And they are just bewildered at why there doesn't seem to be more demand for change at the head coaching position. Without even looking ahead necessarily to, like a will he, won't he, like how do you approach that? And how do you try to translate that for some fans that are a little bit less familiar with the fan base and with the school?
I think I think the best way to put it is that the expectations for what is great at Michigan from the outside are the same expectations that we would put on what's great for anybody, like, getting to the college football playoff, winning national titles. That's why we think Alabama is great. Clemson is great. Ohio State is great. Oklahoma, just outside that tier because at least it gets to the playoff. I don't think that's what the ultimate goal was at Michigan. I think that they'd love to have it if it's possible. But as we've talked about, Michigan wants to do things on its terms. It doesn't want to get involved in the talent acquisition kind of stuff that you kind of have to do sometimes to get, the top players. And I don't mean like cheating or paying them. I just mean from an academic standpoint, there are some players Michigan is just not going to accept that other schools will based on their grades. It's not to say that they don't relax their requirements for student athletes. They do, but there's only so far that they're willing to go. And I think that at Michigan, they want to win, but it's like I wrote in the column, the whole, I've seen it get used against him, the whole, those who stay will be champions thing that Bo Schembechler said. Well, when Schembechler said that, he wasn't talking about national titles. Like Michigan's won one national title in the last 70 years in 1997. It's not like this is a program that's been glorified and winning tons of national titles year in and year out. What Bo Schembechler was talking about was winning Big Ten titles. That's where I think that the ultimate goal is for Jim Harbaugh. They want him to be competing for Big Ten titles, but at the same time, I think that at Michigan, there's an understanding that the program now is in a much better position than it was when they hired him, and that for a large part, Harbaugh has accomplished what they wanted him to accomplish in getting them out of the mess that was the Rich Rod Brady Hoke era, and at least getting them back to a spot where they're winning 10 games a year or winning 9 games a year. There is no bottoming out. There hasn't been the highs of the highs that they want yet. But as I wrote in the column, I think at some point we need to adjust. Is that Michigan failing to meet expectations, or is that just a byproduct of Ohio State being really freaking good and nobody really being able to compete with them? Because the only teams in the country that can compete against Ohio State on a regular basis are Clemson and Alabama, and maybe Georgia if it gets its act together, and maybe Oklahoma, and maybe Oregon's getting on its way there. But right now, those are the only 3 teams. And I think that it works against Michigan that they just so happen to be one of the 3 greatest teams in the country's, bitter rival, and they get hammered over the head with it, whereas nobody else in the Big Ten is beating Ohio State either. But you don't hear them saying that they need to fire their coach because they can't beat Ohio State. And I think that's the conundrum Harbaugh faces, because he was such a big name and it was such a high profile hire. And when it happened, there was very much a level of expectation placed on it that I don't think was realistic. And since he's not meeting those unrealistic expectations, everybody outside's like, well, when are they going to fire him and bring in somebody who can? It's like, I don't think those are the expectations in Ann Arbor. I don't think at the school that's what anybody was expecting. They expected what they're getting. They'd like a little more, but they don't require it.
So, but then you can't lose to Michigan State.
No, you can't.
So that's the thing. Like, yeah, I agree with you. So then, all right, but just make sure you're handling your business against Michigan State. You're not going to beat Ohio State. All right. Like that's too much to ask.
And that's why it's a bad loss. But it's like you hear, like you saw on Saturday, it's like, oh, like the whole hot
This is
seat
the
thing
beginning of
turns
the
up.
end.
Yeah. And it's like, no, it's not, man. It's a bad loss, but they've also beaten Michigan State the last few years. This was just unexpected. It's not like the floor fell out from them. This, like we talked about it before the season, like last year was supposed to be the year that if they were taking the step forward, they were going to do it. They had the senior quarterback. They were bringing in the new offense. They had a veteran-laden team. This year, we knew that there was going to be a whole bunch of new stuff there, and it was kind of a reset season. So they lost, and it's a bad loss. They were 3 touchdown favorites, though, as I said on the podcast all last week. They never should have been that large of a favorite in the game. But optically, it doesn't look good, but it's also a reset year. So I think ultimately what I tried to write in my column was that Michigan doesn't need to change its expectations. It's the rest of the country needs to change its expectations of Michigan.
I don't know that I don't disagree with what you're saying, though. I don't know how much a reset year really is like, I don't know how much rope that buys them. Like, everybody has to reload, and everyone has to, this is also year 2 with the same offensive coordinator. And this is a year where this is Michigan State what kind of year is it for Michigan State? So I think it's really important to see how they close the rest of the year. I have no idea whether he's on the hot seat or not. But I think that this loss, because it was to Michigan State and because this year is not a year that Michigan State should beat you, I do think loss is more meaningful than just a kind of a bad look. But that I think that they can control their destiny in that way to a degree by just how good they look the rest of the way.
Don't you think if you're a Michigan, like I get the comparison, it's your rival Ohio State, but if I was a Michigan fan, I would not compare because of some of the academic requirements. Don't you think it's similar to Notre Dame though? Like I think that would frustrate me. Like, and I know they don't play in the Big Ten and they're independent. They kind of have their own path, but they've been in a national championship game recently. They've made the playoffs and they have academic restrictions where they're kind of in that same class. And yet they're doing it. Now they have the advantage. They don't have to do it going through Ohio State.
But what has happened when Notre Dame has had to play the Ohio States and Clemsons of the world?
They've gotten exposed.
Don't get Brian Kelly on that. Don't get Brian Kelly on that one. He's not in the mood today. He is not in the mood today.
Did he have a fiery press conference today?
Yeah. All the Notre Dame beat writers were like, "Ooh, it's spicy Brian Kelly today."
My antennas were up because Barton, what you said about how there was a little cockiness, right? I mean, it's kind of like what Brian Kelly has been this year. So I was watching the game this weekend versus Georgia Tech, and I think they were up 10 at halftime, and he was doing his halftime interview. And he came up there, I forget who the reporter was, she asked him a question or something, and he wasn't bristly. He just said, you know what? He's like, we're going to come out. He's like, we're going to go down the field. We're going to score. We're going to get a stop. We're going to take control of the game. And like, he was you don't hear coaches say that very often at the halftime interview. It's like, well, we got a lot of stuff we got to work on. He was very matter of fact. We're going to take control of this game. We're going to take the ball. We're going to go down the field. We're going to score. Like there's a new Brian Kelly.
I'm telling you, man, I love it.
Yeah, I like it.
So here's the today's press conference. I tweeted this out. There were several sort of kind of spicy comments that he made to some questions along the way. But one of the questions was something to the effect of, what made you feel like Notre Dame, Clemson back in their 2018 game was closer than the score appeared. He said a few things. He said, this is the quote that stuck out to me. I just felt like we had a lot of young players that were going to continue to grow in our program, and we played an outstanding football team. People fail to recognize the next week they absolutely blitzed Alabama, and nobody talked about the talent gap there. Nobody talked about the coaching gap there. They just talked about the talent gap and the coaching gap between the Notre Dame and Clemson game. I just felt like from the eye test and what I saw, that was my opinion. Really, all that matters is we get an opportunity to play Clemson this Saturday and compete against them. And who knows? It might not be the only time we play them this year.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he's even saying, you know what? We might lose on Saturday, but we're not losing to anybody else. We're going to win all the rest of these games, and we'll be in Charlotte. We'll get another crack at them.
And I think he's just been like sitting there because here, like the past 3 years now, or 2, I guess, he's been – catching that line like, oh, you guys are doing okay, Brian Kelly. Like, okay, Notre Dame, congratulations on your 10-win seasons. But when you play the big boys like you did in 2018, you get exposed. And I think that he's like sitting around being like, what are we even talking about? Like, they just absolutely put it on Alabama one game later. We played them pretty close, a couple big plays here and there. And this game is a different story. They won the middle 8. And like, I think that
he's not wrong.
Yeah. He's not wrong. And
He
so
is a little wrong because I was saying that at the time, but
you were saying what at the time?
After Clemson, destroyed Alabama the next week, I said the same things. It's like, how come nobody's talking about Alabama the way they talked about Notre Dame?
Well, there you go. You can get a Christmas card from Brian Kelly.
Well, remember when Clemson was dominating Notre Dame, all the Georgia players were on Twitter, and then they went and lost to Texas.
Yeah, that was yeah. So, I think I think look, it's anyone that's compared to the big 3 here at any time, that's a tough task because they're better than everybody all the time right now.
Speaking of Texas, has Tom Herman worked himself out of a tough spot with the win against Oklahoma State? Because I will say this, 4 games left on the schedule. I could see Texas winning out. I could see Texas winning every one of them.
Did you have you even looked at the box score?
I could also
say Texas game.
I could also see Texas losing 3 of those games. I'm just saying that you're looking at Kansas State, Iowa State, and Kansas. What's the fourth one?
West Virginia.
West
Virginia. Okay.
They'll be favored every game. Is that fair?
They'll be favored, but
I don't think
they're all coin
against Iowa
flips.
State.
Those are all coin
At
flip
home.
games.
It's home.
They're at
I think
home,
they will
though.
be
They'll
favored.
be favored.
Yeah,
Right?
it'll be small. It'll probably be a field goal, but they'll be favored.
I'll be taking Matt Campbell as a dog.
Do you? So, all right.
Yeah,
does Tom
please.
Herman
Like,
enjoy this ride, or do you see this crashing out?
That's the thing. You don't know. It's Texas. At Texas, you're a week away from nothing. Like every single week, you could be heading for a disaster. You could be heading for something great.
We are betting on black at the roulette table with Tom Herman. Like, it is incredible to think the different ways that this could go with 3 out. I mean, they could lose to Kansas, I mean, anything is possible with these Final Four games.
I mean, if
I would
they
stop
could beat,
there. But sure can.
but if they could beat
It would be
Oklahoma State on
hilarious.
Saturday playing like that compared to how Oklahoma State played, they could lose to Kansas.
You know what it all sets up for? A great finish to the season and another year of Sam Ehlinger with that extra year of eligibility coming back, baby. Maybe that's why the kid opted out. Maybe or changed his. That's why he decommitted. He's like, man, he sees the writing on the wall. It's not even going to affect him.
Sam
but
shot him at
still.
Texas, just said, let you know, next year, you got to wrestle the job for
No,
me.
that kid's class of 2022.
Yeah,
So
he
we
won't have to
would
worry about
we would need an additional pandemic.
DK State
to
already
get
drafted
another-
him.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Yeah.
All right. Early line look ahead, looking at week 10. We mentioned at the beginning of the show, Georgia is a 4.5 point favorite against Florida. Texas at home against West Virginia, as we just mentioned, 6.5 point favorites. We are going to have the Pac-12 win totals coming up in a little bit. The Trojans, the debut of breakfast ball, 10.5 point favorites against Herman and Arizona State. Hello, Sun Devils. What's standing out to everybody?
The under on that Pac-12 noon kickoff, like the first half under.
I'm literally placing it right now.
What is the game and what's the number?
It is Arizona State and USC 58.5 at 9 a.m. local.
I kind of like the first half under even better than the total, just in case they wake up in the second half. That's when their bodies start getting used to it. But man, that first half is going to be ugly.
Is it in LA or is it in Arizona?
LA.
Yeah, and there's isn't there kind of that early morning fog in Southern California? It can be pretty chilly in the morning before that sun burns the fog off.
Oh,
yeah, that sounds no fun.
Nope.
I'm going to give major coaching advantage to Herm in terms of who can get their team motivated for that 9 a.m. kickoff. Sun Devils, double-digit dogs.
Yeah, moved up from 7.5 pretty quick too.
Speaking of bets that have already been placed,
Hmm.
Army, Air Force.
Service Academy game. Get on the under right now.
Total opened at 41.5. It's already down to 40.5 at some places. They're clearly catching on because the totals are getting lower. But for those of you who are a little scared of betting the under when it's that low, last year's total was 44.5 between these two. They scored 30 points. The year before that, it was 41.5. They scored 31 points. The year before that was, 54.5. They scored 21 points. Before that,
ridiculous.
Before that, it was 46.5. They scored 43. So that's higher than this total. But the year before that, in 2015, it was 50.5. They scored 23 points.
Let's see. Any other games stand out to y'all from the board?
Clemson, Notre Dame opened up 2.5. It's already up to Clemson minus 5.5. Even with the new Brian Kelly irritated.
I'd like to see that. I hope that gets another. Hope
Me
that gets
too.
a 6.5. I'd like a little more value on Notre Dame.
Ohio State, Rutgers. It's off for some. 37 was the open. Do you take the Knights again, Fornelli? Do you jump on them as a dog?
Money line. You know what?
That's a big number. I think I might too. That's a huge number.
I might. Hey, Chip, Leeds just scored.
It's a new era.
Leeds scored?
Yep.
Mr. Rogers.
There we go.
Let's go.
Biggest storyline in college football this week is the midweek kickoff of the MAC.
Yes.
We got Buffalo, the Bulls beginning their march to Group of 5 playoff berth with Northern Illinois, 10.5 point favorites there. You're saying they're going to finish 5-0, and what do they get? Are they getting 6? What are they? How many games are they getting in? Where they're required? Did you see to declare a champion? They're required 3 games. That's it. Is the requirement. Just get in 3 and you're good. You can claim the championship.
The nice thing about the MAC starting on Wednesday is that current forecasts calling for a lot of wind across the Midwest on Wednesday. It's going to be a windy Wednesday in the MAC.
Love it.
The whole league is playing, right? 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And they start at like 6 Eastern. So
yeah, that's like that feels like a holiday or something.
Yes.
Are we going to do a live podcast? Live show for the MACtion?
We should.
I might parlay all 6 unders.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we can't give out any locks, but just take all the information that you know about this podcast, take Buffalo, lay them the points, and take the under in every single one of these games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good stuff. You can follow him on Twitter at Barton Simmons. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Tom Fernell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Up next, Pac-12 win totals. We'll be previewing the season ahead in the Pac-10. We will not get to MAC win totals, but we are just on all of the all the MACtion unders until proven otherwise. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.